Hi, I'm Markku Wilenius, the traveling futurist. Can you believe if I tell you that the professional futurist like me does not actually know anything more about the future than you do? But what we may do is that we have some assumptions that we have created all the time. So let's look for this question. So, the secret to becoming a good futurist lies in the way that you can organize information. You see, we receive all kinds of information, but the sense-making process, what type of the tools and methods we are using, that differentiates the ordinary observer of information and those ones that tries to distill out of that information something which has a meaning for the future. So, say any futurist that make the claim that in the year of 2045 the robots are thinking as intelligently and as a complex manner as human being. That guess might be wrong, might be right, and you can make similar guesses. But the fact is, neither of us know. There is something important here, because the information that is relevant for future comes in the form I call the invitation. What is this invitation? This invitation emerges out of many options that we have at each given moment for the future. And that invitation is something we need to be very, very sensitive about. So what are actually our tools to discern the information that has a meaning? Let's talk about that a little bit more. So, first of all, every futurist have some kind of methods and tools that they are using for framing. For instance, I have two particular tools. I'm using systems thinking. Systems thinking is radically different than linear thinking. Systems thinking is interested in connections and directions and the elements that are within the system and how they interact. So that's one tool that I have that I use in almost every case. The other tools that I use is what is called Kondratiev waves. These Kondratiev waves were invented by the Russian economist Nikolai Kondratiev over 100 years ago. But he first laid out this idea that societies and economies develop in long cycles, 40 to 60 years. After Kondratiev, there has come many others that have contributed to that idea of the long cycles. And I have made my own interpretation about it. This tool is a powerful framing tool to understand what is happening next, because you look at the preceding waves and then you make your own analysis that, okay, what comes next? So these framing tools are so important. For the futurist, a very important thing is that we are clear about our own assumptions about the future. So assumptions meaning that we know with what type of the way we are actually using the future. What are our assumptions, expectations? Because those are the ones that actually gives our very individual look for the future. Because each of us have that very individual outlook what might happen in the future based on our own constitution, so to say. Now, future studies is then about using methods and tools and frameworks, but it's also about how do we use our internal processing tools. And we have actually 4 of them. The first one that we have is our capacity to discern, to differentiate. We differentiate the apple from the orange, for instance. But also we can differentiate different signs that we may or may not think are relevant for the future. For instance, if we are seeing the drone, what is our assumption about the future? Is the assumption that, okay, we have now been seeing how the drones have been kind of coming into the market and we are able to use them. Is the next step then that we will have a flying cars, or do we have a flying carpets instead? We don't know, but we can have a different assumptions. But our capacity to discern and capacity to differentiate one from another is actually not so much that happens in our thinking, it happens through our senses. So it is a way to be on your senses, to look and observe the reality as it is. And to be able to do that in a real objective way, you need to train yourself for that. Try to leave your assumptions and just observe things as they are. This is the first internal tool that we as human beings have for understanding the future. Now, the second important internal tool we have is, of course, our thinking. Our thinking enables us to understand and process the information that we get from outside, but moreover, it's our internal tool. So we can create ideas, we can imagine different futures, and that's a very powerful tool that only the human being have. It has to do very much our intellect. So thinking is a very much like an intellectual property of ourselves. And again, it needs a time and a space, and we can develop and build our capacity to think. And that is something that we often neglect in this world, where we have all kinds of impulses coming and we are just reacting them without using our capacity to think and think through and reflect and come with something of our own. But also when we are imagining the futures, something powerful happens according to the quantum theory, which is that we are setting off an energy, because everything is actually, at the end of the day, it's shifting from energy to the matter and matter to the energy. Anything is moving in this world. So when we are sending our energy by imagining futures, that is actually having an impact on the future. The third internal tool we have are our feelings and our emotions. In fact, the most of the information that we receive and we process are of this type. So there is a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings when it comes to any issue or event that we are countering. And sometimes we just have the feeling that we should not do that, or we actually should do that. So there is a lot of information around that. But the word of the emotional intelligence is actually very suitable here, because we don't think it so often, but emotions are actually part of our intellect, not anything else. It's a part of our intellect. And more we are using our emotions as a source of information and we process them in a manageable ways, then there is a huge amount of information, some of which is very relevant for our future. Because when we think about the human constitution, fears, for instance, are the ones that have built in us in order to warn us about the future. Now, it's a good thing as such, but then sometimes and quite often it overtakes us, and then it reduces our capacity to act. If we act only out of the fear, that diverts us from seeing the things as they really are. They come as problems, and fears easily come. They come much bigger than what they really are. So we need to be dealing intelligently with this emotional information we receive and what we process. Then we have the fourth wonderful internal tool we can call intuition. How this intuition works? It correlates, it synthesizes, it integrates the different kinds of information we have about the future and make it as a whole. This source of information is quintessential because that gives us ultimately the confidence we often need when we are making the big decisions. So we are asking ourselves, what is that my intuition or my gut, or however you name it, what does it actually tell me? Where should I be heading? This or that direction? Intuition always comes and helps because it works in such a way that goes beyond our rational mind. And that is because intuition is not a matter of intellect and capacity to think. It belongs to the field of consciousness. So with intuition, we work in the level of awareness. We work in the level of when we are becoming knowledgeable about something that we didn't know before, and our intuition helps to provide that information. So, learning to use these tools and applying the frameworks such as systems thinking and long-term dynamic waves are helping us to create our educated guesses about the future. Of course, in addition to this, we are sometimes using trend analysis, which is very typically in future studies. We use statistical analysis. We try to crowdsource different data, and so forth and so forth. So there are different ways that we can do this, but ultimately it's about the combining these different tools and methods, internal and external, that we finally become a good futurist. And perhaps most importantly, a really good futurist rather gives directions and outlines than really detailed predictions. You can do that as well, and you can even sometimes be successful with that, but our real work as futurists lie to understand what are those factors, those driving forces that moves the society forward. So when you want to become a futurist, you need to think what is your individual set of tools and methods that you are using to make people more understanding what might lie in the future. So subscribe to my channel, look the other related videos, and give me your comments. What makes a good futurist? See you.